This is a Human Collective podcast. This is episode 3.
We succeeded in extending the human sight far beyond the horizon. It's not even human.
Hello, humans. This is the Human Collective podcast with me, Ross Taylor. For 30 minutes each episode, I'll be chatting to my friends in arguably the weirdest industry on planet Earth, TV and film. This week, I was joined by filmmaker Gavin Keenan, who's worked in a multitude of areas in documentary, entertainment, and high-budget productions too. Most notably on Channel 4's hit show Dairy Girls and Netflix's very first game show, Flinch. Gavin, or Gav as many of us like to call him, has skills in multiple areas across camera operation, casting and research among many others. But this is definitely someone who you want to have in your crew for those long and often stressful production moments because he's loaded with really useful skills and he is a dead-on guy who is crucially great crack as well. Why am I doing that stupid voice? I don't know. It was great to check in with Gav anyway and to share a few odd TV tales and a few must-see shows came out of the podcast as well, so definitely check those out. Also, I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's been keeping up with us over the last few episodes. Your support is definitely really it's appreciated and it's really noticed. Okay, thank you. Enjoy anyway. Gavin,
Ross,
how's it going, man?
yeah, it's not going too bad. How's yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. Still locked in like the rest of us, but slowly but surely getting out a little bit more often. And yeah, life's not too bad. How's lockdown been for you?
Well, I think for everyone, the first 2 months were pretty solid, rough. But now you can see life, regular life, starting to creep back in now. So I've been venturing out of the house and even made it back all the way back to Fermanagh a couple of times in the last month. So yeah, it's getting back to normal now.
Yeah, so were you in the middle of a job when this whole thing finished, or were you in between jobs?
I had just started my first day. I was doing a few weeks on the third series of Dairy Girls. And then on the first day, I was kind of doing a bit of cover for someone else. On the first day at 2 p.m., the production coordinator comes back in from a meeting. He told me he was taking it, and he just looks and he looks at us and he says, "We're stepping down." Just bear in mind that this only my first day. It only started at 9, and this is still only 2 p.m. So hadn't really done all that much. Hadn't really felt like built up much momentum, and it's like actually it's gone. So it was a bit bizarre, you know.
It's not happening.
I think I was a bit arrogant. I thought, well, we've started now. Once we've started, they're not going to make us stop, you know. But I was badly wrong. Not even 5% of the way through. But there you go.
It wasn't meant to be, Gav. Was that would that be one of your first gigs on a sort of high end production, or have you done a few before?
Well, funny enough, I was actually the production assistant on the first series of Dairy Girls that went out 2 or 3 years ago. So that was a real highlight to my career. So even I was there was the possibility I might have been going back for the second series, but I was working on a game show for Netflix that you would be aware of. So I didn't get
Yeah.
back onto it, but to be attached to it again, even if it was only for a couple of weeks, was quite nice, you know. So I definitely working for something like that is definitely a highlight, you know.
Absolutely. And so okay, so to give a bit of context, me and you have worked together on a couple of things, a couple of taster tapes on another show, No Place Like Tyrone, which was, you know, it was another experience in itself. But what I've kind of noticed about you is that you've worked in multiple genres and different positions within those genres too. You know, you've worked in entertainment and documentary. You've worked in casting and research and camera as well. So, why do you have so much? Why have you chosen to do that, sort of to get as much variety in those positions? Is that something that you sort of intended, or was it something that just happened?
Well, a lot of it would have been because I'm genuinely interested in all those opportunities that came up. Another part of it would be just being pragmatic. I didn't really have anything going when certain things landed my way, so I thought, yeah, why not? And that bit of extra experience will undoubtedly come in handy somewhere down the line. So, like, a part of it was thinking, yeah, okay, why not? If it'll fill a gap. But most of it was just out of genuine interest, you know. But I have kind of been trying to focus a little bit more on some specific departments more than others. Mainly like camera and production, because it'd be an ambition of mine to be like producer director. You know, I kind of like the roles. I was working on a job late last year, up until like just before Christmas. Is for this BBC religion and ethics show, which you know, not exactly my bag, but there was a lot of there was a great variation between being in the office and organizing things, like laying the groundwork, and then actually going out and doing it as well in a part of like maybe a two-man team. I was like second camera, and I was working with this guy. He'd been like an established producer director, and it's like working alongside him and other guys in roles like his, where I was thinking, no, that's the perfect balance because maybe I wouldn't want work entirely in camera or entirely in production, but that kind of balance would be good. You know, I think it's good variation. So that's kind of my ambition.
Class, man. I think it's such an important thing to have, you know, your mental, um, your your sort of the presence of the producer, having a knowledge of the camera side of things, having a knowledge of the casting side of things or documentary. It's nice to know that like you would have somebody coming through those all those areas and sort of having a hand in everything. I think, you know, the best producers that I've worked with are definitely people who are that way minded, you know. Also, I actually there's quite a lot of producers out there who don't have that kind of scope of experience. There's some people who sort of shoot up the ranks to that producer level. I think a lot of is the business side, and a lot of it's like the people management side. But you know, not having that camera knowledge, you know, sometimes that just costs. It can be quite costly bringing in, you know, your director of photography and things like that. All those things are really important. But you know, a lot of the times I've been in skeleton crews where you have self-shooting, you know, producers who are completely pushing the whole thing on their own. It's super stressful for those people, but you know, it's also sometimes the most enriching process are the ones where you sort of run and gun and you make things happen, you know.
Yeah, like some of the skeleton crews, a couple of them, me and you worked on together. They've been great because if you get the right mix of people, the camaraderie can be like brilliant, and it's that kind of good atmosphere within the group that really keeps you going forward and just makes the job a whole lot nicer, you know. But for example, the same job I was just referring to, the guy I was working with, he'd like really plan out a story so that it wasn't just a case of, oh yeah, we'll go there and we'll get something like this or we'll get that. He'd like break it down into like objectives, and then also because he was so experienced with how long it takes, you know. For example, we were filming one segment and we had just that one day, and we think it was supposed to be a 12-minute segment, and he was able to say to me, on an entire day for 12 minutes, and you think, yeah, well, like an entire working day, you get 12 minutes in the bag, no problem. But he had actually structured out so much and had like such a kind of quality benchmark in mind that he was actually telling me and explained it very well why it was actually going to be a really tight day and how it was we were really going to have to push it to get it. So it's like obviously he was so experienced, you know, that that was amazing just to see how you can structure a story so well before you even really get out there and meet the person who you're going to be working with or the environment that you're going to be working within, you know. So I just be a lot of admiration for that, and then also it's just the part of like getting to sit down to trying to plan it out and kind of figure out which elements you're going to emphasize or just try and make the story before you film the story. That was super interesting to me as well.
Yeah, and especially when if you're working in that world of documentary, there's certain like levels of skills that you can build in both entertainment and documentary, but people who are one way and the other, they have certain skills that are drawn purely from that genre, And I find some of the best producers that I've worked with and producer directors in documentary, they have this skill for knowing how to work with the contributors in a certain way, because you're dealing with such delicate topics and such sensitive topics, you know. And I've worked with those producers. One of my last documentaries I was working on BBC was with the traveller community, and you know, one of the great skills was Gillian Collins is, you know, a good friend of mine now, but she had an amazing skill to kind of to work with people with really sensitive topics and let them know that they're in a safe space to kind of discuss sensitive issues, you know. And you could tell that care is there, and the care with the contributors is just something I think is an amazing, it's just such an important thing to have, you know. But you know, when a documentary has contributors who feel like they are so, like some of those Netflix documentaries, I mean, I would find American contributors can be they're just unreal, but some of those sensitive stories, the Making of Murderers out there, the Staircase documentaries, the Pharmacists, like there's just the way that you know there's someone behind that camera who's pitching those questions to them and have spent time outside of the documentary, outside of the interviews, to get that level of trust there.
But the ability to work with the contributors, I think, might actually be one of the most criminally underrated aspects of the job, because there's just been so many times, like even on the lighter stuff, you get someone in front of camera and they just sort of get nervous and they clam up, you know. Like I can remember one time I made this little card documentary back in Fermanagh, and I was working with like a lot of the older generation, the guys who would have no time for that, but they were willing to help in a way. But the thing I thought was really valuable was actually not to try too much to reassure them, not be too much like, oh no, I promise I'll not do this. Just I want to say a bit less and just say it once, like, I promise you I'll not do that. And then they kind of get a feeling for you. But of course, every kind of group of people is different, and I've worked with different producers that have dealt with more delicate subjects, you know, and just seeing how they can kind of get through all the rigmarole and just sort of get to the crux of what the person's concerned about and reassure them about that one aspect, that is invaluable, you know. You can't really teach it, you can just sort of observe and hope you kind of pick it up, you know. But absolutely, it's just one of the most important aspects of the job.
Sweet. Now, Gav, I would be lying to you if I didn't say I was gonna pitch a few of our segments for the podcast today, and I figured I'd make you my test on me for a few of these, because I want to get as much out of this as possible when I've got time to chat to you. I want people to come away with like new things in their head. They go, okay, well, I came away from that podcast with some information that I could take into my life in lockdown. So the first segment I'm going to pitch to you is Gavin's top 3 lockdown classics. And this is where basically you're going to tell me about your 3 lockdown classics, the absolute gold standard of TV, whatever that may be to you throughout your lockdown experience. So please do tell me. What's number 1?
Okay.
Or should we go from 3 to 1?
Actually, yeah, let's go 3 to 1.
Let's go 3
just
to 1.
Before we start, does it have to be something that only got released during lockdown, or can it be something from maybe like a year or two ago? Just anything?
Anything.
Okay, that's relief, right. Okay, the number 3, I'm gonna say Orthodox, which is this 4-part series on Netflix. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure, actually, you know, because but it's about this young girl. I think she must be about 19, 20, and she runs away from an Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg in New York for Berlin in Germany, obviously. And it is a little bit uneven, you know, I'll be honest, but the bits in Berlin are a bit too easy almost, but the bits done in New York is just really well done, like so down to earth. It's one of those kind of things where you feel like you've stepped into it, you know, into their own like flat. There's no razzmatazz about it, like going, oh, it's New York, it's lovely. It's actually quite brutal what she has to put up with in New York, and just mainly for those segments more than anything else, just I'd say check it out. And then it's only 4 parts, so you can get through it quite quickly, and even though I have issues with it, I still really enjoyed it, you know. So I Orthodox on Netflix.
Okay, Orthodox. Fair play.
That's number
No
number
worries.
three.
Okay, so what's number two?
Number two is a big favorite of mine actually, and feels quite relevant because the new series just came out like a week ago. But it's this animated show called F is for Family. Are you familiar with that?
That's the Bill Burr series, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So it's in its fourth series now, and well, Bill Burr, like I suppose he's probably my favorite comedian. I got to see him in Dublin once, which was an absolute pleasure. But I think, there's comedians who have hit bigger highs, like they've had bigger peaks. Like maybe, like for example, like Bill Murray had like the Ghostbusters franchise, or whatever. And like maybe Bill Burr's never been up there that much with what he's done outside of stand-up. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find a comedian who has as solid um, collection of work as he does. Like I absolutely love that F is for Family, and I think it's very underrated. I think like the style of animation right now is just to push it to do as much as you can with it. Like Rick and Morty are always on these like absolutely outlandish adventures, which is fantastic, But I think there's something really respectable about being able to tell a story that actually could happen. And like just set in the 70s, it just makes for a lot of good jokes. Or is it maybe the late 60s? One or the other.
Class. And what's your number one?
Number one is, I think it came out a year ago on Amazon. What's Amazon streaming platform
Prime
called?
Video.
Prime Video. Chernobyl.
Oh, class.
I haven't been able to shut up about this since I first saw it. It's a 5-6 part series. Obviously, it's about the absolute disaster that happened out in Chernobyl back in '89 or whatever. But it's just stunning. Some of it does feel kind of more like a reconstruction, rather than like some sort of drama. But when it notch goes up a gear, it's some of the best television I've ever seen. And it's there's no, we like swearing this. There's no
Yeah,
uh,
say whatever you want.
there's no tough about. There's no bull. It's just it's almost like straight up and very honest. And like sometimes it just will give you a scene that's like a punch to the gut or something. It's just some of the best rendered television I've ever seen. And I couldn't believe that it was actually after I finished it, I was thinking I'm gonna look up the guy who like wrote it or whatever. I'm sure he's got like some sort of amazing like back catalog like Alan Sorkin or something or whatever. And turns out he was the guy who wrote like Scary Movie 3 or something, or just something, one of those really terrible, maybe even the rip-offs of scary movies or something. I just like I couldn't believe one guy could go from that, well, I'm sure it has its fans, to like Chernobyl. And just, well, I thought there's hope for me yet. But no,
That's it.
that's the one I'd really recommend. It's not the easiest watch, it's not the easiest to sell, but I think if you stick with it, you'll feel very rewarded.
Brilliant, man. I haven't seen any of those three, and I'm definitely gonna check that out. And I hopefully the listeners will give this a check out as well. They sound like cracking things to watch. We all need a bit of escapism in these sort of odd
Yeah.
times, so for sure it sounds like we'll get a wee dose of that.
Chernobyl might not be the easiest thing to watch. Well, we watched it about 2 months ago when things were still fairly tense. Maybe a bit of that fed into it, but I think either way, you'd have to agree it's a great show.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect. Okay, so that was Gav's top 3 Lockdown classics. Moving on to the next segment, because I really want to try some of these with you. Now, it's my opinion that the TV and film industry is one of the weirdest industries that there
Absolutely.
is. Period.
Oh, agreed. I
I
think
have-
this is going to be a good segment for you.
Yeah, I've had some really strange situations, and there's just that moment in your head where you go, this is just so weird. Where else would I be doing this? I'll give you just a quick example for me. I
Okay.
once had a kilt fitted and sent from Australia for a bearded dragon.
What?
A little tiny Scottish kilt.
As you do, you couldn't just like buy some cloth from like a shop down the road.
Fuck.
Now, what show was
Oh
this?
no, no, no! This is a very special bearded dragon. He had his tartan kilt, and there was a tiny little hat with a little like piece of ginger. I couldn't possibly tell you the name of this on the show.
Okay,
It never
okay.
got made, unfortunately. But
I wonder why.
I will say that I will say that it was a very odd time in my life. And you know what made the story even weirder is that the bearded dragon actually stood me up on the shoot. He was supposed to make it down. And he had a birthday party that day, and there was this sort of cross communication with this absolutely like ridiculous man who had the bearded dragon. And he was like, "Look, I've got birthday parties. I've been trying to ring this guy before this shoot, texting him and everything. He told me he could make it down. He was like, look, I've double booked here, mate. I'm not gonna make it down to you and all this." And I'm literally like in the middle of a shoot going, "What do you mean you're not gonna bring me the bearded dragon? I have the kilt. Like everything's here. You know, I've got a cowboy outfit for him. I've got a sombrero, like maracas, the whole deal." And this guy's like, "Nah, man, I'm not coming." We have an argument on the phone, and I like this bearded dragon is up like at the end of the day, and it's just one of those things where I was like, you know, I went to the director and just said, "Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, we were all hyped about this bearded dragon coming down." And I was like, "I'm going to be honest with you. Like, it's not coming. The bearded dragon's not coming right now. But I will get you a bearded dragon by the end of the day." So he was like, "Look, we really need like there was a lot riding on it." He was like, "Okay, we'll move its slot around till the end of the day and that'll be all good." And so would you believe that by the end of the day, I actually had a bearded dragon in a kilt by the end of the day?
Wow. The same bearded dragon, or you somehow found
No.
another bearded dragon?
No, I wanted to give a shout out to Rebecca Robson, who is, you know, one of my friends had done the aim high skating with Northern Ireland screen. But I put the feelers out across the world like flaming arrows. Do any of you have anyone or friends or anyone who have a bearded dragon? And I was trolling through like bearded dragon groups on Facebook. Anyway, long story short, I just said to the guy, "Look, I will pay you like whatever you need to get down here in terms of petrol and all that shit. I'll give it to you today. Just bring this bearded dragon down." And then eventually I managed to convince the guy to come down. So I mean, there was a happy ending to the story, Gav. We got the fucking dragon. We had him in the kilt. It was
So
glorious.
you have to name. So you have to name your firstborn child after this guy who sorted you for the bearded dragon.
Yeah.
I would. I've been in that scenario. Like, it's not exactly the craziest story, but I remember when I was working on the first series of Dairy Girls. You know, there's a segment in the final episode where they did a bit of step aerobics, and they had it prearranged that this lady would come in and teach them the moves. I was grand, but things got moved around, and then the lady who's going to teach them moves couldn't make it. So, like, as soon as I landed in the office this Thursday or Friday or something, they said, "You need to find us, or could you please find us a step aerobics teacher who is free tomorrow between these hours and knows this certain dance." I can't even remember what it was. I think it was like the hey, the hat, that one. And I was like, "I will try." And I'll be honest, like, that seemed like a very specific order, because I don't know much about what people are doing at gyms these days, but I'm fairly certain step aerobics hasn't been popular since the 90s. I was thinking, geez, how am I going to get someone who knows like this perfectly small Venn diagram of like 3 or 4 different things? So I just like whacked up a list of like leisure centers around like everyone, as well, trying to do some other things. And I accidentally ended up like contacting a lady in like Belfast, New York or something, you know. But luckily I found one in Lisburn, so it's not too far away. And she knew the move. She said, "Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites." Like, "Yeah, I'm not up to much. I can come down." It's like, thank God. Like, I don't know what saint was looking after me that day, because like I think I'm like half a grand in debt to St. Anthony at this stage, but one of them was looking out for me, you know. But that's
God,
not
man.
really. That's not even really the bizarrest story. Like, just as you're talking about weird stories, I can remember I was working for this housing show, fairly straightforward. Yeah, I want a house at this price, and there's a house at that price, whatever. And one day they sent me to Derry to do some filming for myself, because we didn't really have contributors. We're just getting shots of like potentials. And there's this one place in a fairly central street in Derry, and it's kind of like some sort of weird house that had been turned into like a reception for a business, but then they were thinking of moving it back into a house. And I got there, it's really dingy, and no one actually turned up to look at it, bar this one guy who really didn't want to be filmed. So we didn't really have much to go on, but the guy who was showing or opening it to the people, he was quite keen that it would be on TV. You know, I guess he thought it a real opportunity. So when he saw that I was going to kind of like pitch it in after like half an hour, he was like, no, 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 there's more, right? So he takes me down. He says, this place actually has a basement. It's like, well, that doesn't say so on the thing. He's like, yeah, yeah, no, no, it does, right? So then he takes us outside and he goes to the building next door and he lets us down in this basement, which obviously straight away, no, that's not the basement for the building that's listed. It's obviously the basement for the building next door. But anyway, he brings us downstairs and says, no, this will really captivate you. And turns on this like one flickering light to illuminate this really cluttered basement. And I mean, like, I'm starting to get a bit nervous here. You know, we're in a basement now. There's no natural light. Nobody really knows I'm here, apart from like one person in the office back in Belfast. There's like mannequins lying around. There's like old circus gear lying around. And it's like he tried to like sell me this whole show from what was in the basement. And I was thinking, I don't work in Dickinson's Real Deal, but the guy was just so insistent, and I let him get on the wrong side of me, so he is between me and the door. And I was thinking, oh God. And like, all the stuff he wants to show me is just pure tat. And I thought, like, after about another 20 minutes of this, I said to myself, I need to make a push to get out of here. And I just went, listen, you know, this is great. It's not really what we want for a housing show. It's more like maybe try Dickinson's Real Deal or something, you know. And there's almost that bit where I thought he was just about to go crazy or get offended. He had this look in his eye, and then it just at the last minute turned just to disappointment. I went, right, yeah, grand, no problem. I tell you, I was glad to get out of there.
Oh my god! Had you what do you think would have happened if you'd humoured him and ventured further into that basement?
It looked sizable enough. I mean, like, there's that much stuff. I couldn't really tell how much space there was in there, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it went like another twice the length. But I did humor him a lot. Like, he had all this mad stuff. Some of it was cool, but a lot of it was just mad. And like, I recorded some of it, you know, just to kind of like please him, and just because also I was kind of like scraping a barrel. Like, it was a bit of a letdown. Nobody showed up to look at this weird house shop place, so I didn't actually have anything to bring back. So I thought, maybe, you know, so I record a few mannequins here. Had a couple of trophies, which was sort of all right, but most of it's just pure tat, like random pieces of metal, which maybe he knew what use they were, but to me it just looked like random pieces of tat.
Yeah, one man's trash is another man's treasure, Gavin. That's what they say.
Well, I don't know. That's pushing it a bit.
It's also just garbage, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so here, we're down to the last few minutes here. So one thing I really wanted to nab off you, one of the most important actually segments I think of this podcast is going to be Advice of the Day with Gav. So have you got any advice, any resources or tools or anything that would benefit our listeners? Feel free to share.
Yeah, well, actually, you know, funny enough, it's not so much relating to like media stuff at all. I think you could actually take this and use it in any kind of whatever industry you work in. But a friend of mine really kind of made me realize the importance of just getting a couple of little things done in the morning time. For example, routine's a little bit out of whack here during lockdown, but so it can be really hard to motivate yourself without being like in a working environment, you know. It's just quite hard to motivate yourself to do sort of work like that when you're in your own house, you know. But you get up and you do like two or three simple tasks. Usually there's a pile of dishes in the kitchen in the morning times, which is actually brilliant. You whack on the heat and you wash it away. You get that out of the way and you clean the kitchen a little bit, and then it feels like you use those little tasks, dishes, counter, floor, whatever, and then it kind of feels like you're building up a bit of momentum before you start. And then that's just for like lockdown purposes. Of course, usually I just get up, eat the breakfast, and go to work. But just for the lockdown kind of segment or lockdown times, however long the last for more, just getting those little few things done untidying whatever little environment you work in. If you work in your room, I don't know why, I just can't work in a messy room. So if you tidy, if you do some dishes, do some basic chores and just tidy before you get down to work, it actually kind of helps clear the head and build a bit of momentum, you know?
100%, Gav. That's really good, really sound advice. I've been doing that, cleaning up my environment in my head and my physical environment more, and it really has helped me become more productive. It's helped me churn out more podcasts, so I couldn't recommend that advice more. Look, Gav, it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming on. And I look forward to working with you in more Human Collective projects, and obviously more crazy projects in the future. But please, guys, like and subscribe our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify for more podcasts. Gav, thank you so much for coming on, man. You're a legend. Love you.
Ross,
and I'll see
thanks
you
for
soon.
having us. Good luck.
No worries, bud.
See ya.
Cheers.